Good morning. Welcome to Bethel Gospel Chapel. And this is our Sunday morning webcast for March 29th. And I'm going to start off with some announcements. And our announcements are nothing because we don't have any regularly scheduled events at Bethel Gospel Chapel, at least not in person. Sunday morning webcast, this is the second. So officially nothing, but unofficially, as believers, you fellowship as you can, whether it's just with your family, in your home, or whether it's just small groups, in appropriate group size, with appropriate distance between individuals, to keep things safe and healthy. But apart from that, that's what we do. I'm going to begin now with the children's story, as we like to do every Sunday morning. And so it's time for a kid's story. And I wonder if any kids remember what our story was from, and who was in our story, and what book of the Bible it was. If you can remember, it is the book of Ruth. And we've been talking about 2 or 3 characters in this book. There's a lady that lost her husband and sons. Anybody remember her name? Her name was Naomi. They were in the country of Moab, and that was because there was a famine in Israel. They were from Bethlehem. Previously, we learned that Naomi found out that there was food in Bethlehem again, so she was going to return to Bethlehem, her hometown. She had 2 daughters-in-law, and one of them went with her back to Bethlehem, if you remember which one. Her name was Ruth. So Ruth went back to Bethlehem with Naomi. It says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 19, the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" It had been how many years? Could have been 10, 20 years since she was in Bethlehem before. Now, Mr. Parker told us what the name Naomi means. I wonder if anyone remembers. What does the name Naomi mean? It means pleasant. But when the women said, "Can this be Naomi?" Naomi said, "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." So Naomi means pleasant, and Mara means bitter. She says, "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." When I was a kid, hearing this story, I was wondering why Naomi was so grumpy. She, a grumpy old woman. But as I learned more, I found out that for a woman in those times, if you lost your husband and you lost your sons, you were in bad shape. Things weren't very good for you. It's a very difficult life for a woman without a husband or children. And so she had good reason to feel not very fortunate. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem. So at least she had Ruth with her. And they arrived in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. They were about to harvest barley. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing, which means a man of importance, an important man. Maybe he was wealthy, maybe he had a prominent position in the village. He was a man of standing whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabitess, said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." And apparently there was leftover grain in the fields. If you owned a field, would you leave grain left over in the field? If I had a field, I'd probably take all the grain. But there was a law in Israel that said you weren't supposed to harvest all the grain. You were supposed to maybe leave the corners. I wonder if anyone knows about that law. And it's in the book of Leviticus. And I'll read it. It says, "When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the alien." And so that was a law for Israel. And would you believe that Ruth, the Moabitess, knew about the laws in Israel? She must have known about these laws. Imagine that. She's turning out to be a pretty good daughter-in-law. So she knew about the law, and she said to her mother-in-law, "Let me go to the fields and pick over leftover grain." It's called gleaning. And so if you were Naomi, boy, it would sure be good to have a daughter-in-law like Ruth who knew about Israel, who knew about Israel's God, and who knew about the laws of Israel. And Ruth went out to pick over the leftover grain called gleaning. Ruth was a good daughter-in-law, and we're going to find out what happens after that next Sunday.